Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. In this podcast, we dive into compassionate leadership in today's fast-paced business environment. With our experience and insights, we'll help you lead with heart while securing your career. Join us for engaging conversations and practical advice to elevate your leadership skills and make a real difference. I'm your host, Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, alongside Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader. Today, we will discuss how to be a humane leader in deciding who gets to have the holidays off when your team needs to deliver 7x24 emergency support. Hey, Roberto, how you doing?
Great, Chris. Thank you very much. How about you?
I'm doing great, and I'll tell you, I know you have been working in a new place and you have to provide support. So what are you doing to take the holidays off? Or do you have to work it blended with some of your team members? What are you doing for the holidays?
Well, actually, right now, we don't know because that's something that CEO will determine if we're going to take a holiday vacation or not. But usually, when we have to be 24/7 with support, we have to split, you know, we have to be, how do you say, um, you have to be fair with maybe someone. If someone has taken maybe in the past in a couple of months some vacations, maybe that person won't be allowed to live on the holidays. But if someone, excuse me, if someone requires some time off, maybe you should balance. That's what I usually do.
Yeah, in my experience, we've done many different things, kind of depending on how the roles function for weekend and after hours support. Most of the teams I had were not straight, maybe basically straight support teams, meaning they had daily jobs implementing projects and did support kind of as a sidebar. So back in the olden days, we actually had a pager, that you would rotate, or a hot cell phone that was the critical support cell phone, and you traded it off, and there was a rotation to that. And I would usually let team members kind of trade amongst themselves. In other words, maybe you didn't know that your cousin was going to get married 6 months ago and the schedule was worked out for the year, and now you needed to trade for a weekend off where you couldn't be on call. I usually let the team members kind of trade amongst themselves to keep it fair, and so that I wouldn't intervene too much. But when you approach the holidays, it gets tough, especially if most of the team members are in the same country. Therefore, the holidays are all together, right? If everybody's in the U.S., you get, normally the company will have a Christmas holiday. That means every team member is expecting to be off. Well, sometimes you got to draw straws. Sometimes I would take the duty because I was still technical enough to do it. If I wasn't doing anything super special or I wasn't going to be out of town, I would try and share some of that burden. But sometimes we would just have a random draw. Look, nobody was volunteering to do the 3 days of the Christmas holiday. All right, we're going to draw names out of a hat with my name included. So I would be equally, as long as I was competent in the area we were supporting, I could participate in that. If it was in a technical area where I didn't have the skills, obviously me doing 7x24 support for something I can't help on wouldn't really do much. But it really kind of depended for us a lot on the situation. And our service desk was always open 7x24, so they worked their own schedule. So we only had to handle the more critical problems. That's the other thing. It really is going to depend a lot on how your company staffs over holidays.
Nice. Okay. Um, I remember this big house that was 23 years ago. You remember the Y2K?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember well that we had this problem in which they said our systems are going to collapse. So what we did back then was to, when they switched from 31st to the 1st of January, we had the whole team preparing and being over there because I used to work at a company which processed all the financial transactions for Amex. So we had to be there, you know. And I
Yep.
remember well that of all the team that we were 20, we split, you know, hey, you're going to be from this hour, this bracket of hours, and you're going to be to this one and this one and this one. And nothing happened. I remember well. But at that time, it was so big, it was huge the importance of knowing that your systems would go smoothly and perfectly, that we require to be the whole team. I think that when you require to be 24/7, uh, YouTube split it in two. If you have robust systems, robust applications, then you will have to trust because you have been using those applications maybe in a chaos system, you know, in which they could go mayhem and everything. And if it worked regardless of a human making it work or fixing or something like that, it could be maybe a 75% of the problem. And the other 25, it could be okay. We don't have the whole team doesn't have to be there. You could maybe split it. Okay, please be on call. Even though with this example, 31st of December to January 1st, you're going to be at the party. No, you're not going to be at bed. So take your laptop near you and just check. I don't know, something that will take maybe not the problem away, but some coherence, maybe.
Yeah, that they're available. I mean, certainly compared to 23 years ago till now, connectivity almost anywhere you are, your ability to do things via your iPhone, having your laptop and then tether it to your iPhone to get connectivity almost anywhere is so much better than 23 years ago. So, I mean, you could be on call from almost anywhere. I think one of the other things as a humane leader to focus on too is it can be very hard to be fair. You know, what is fair? How do all, you know, let's suppose you have a team of 10. How do you make it fair for working the holidays when, you know, over the next 5 years, team members rotate in and out of there? Hey, I worked the last Christmas. Yeah, but I didn't even work in this team last year. So, and then they move on. They never had to work at Christmas. So, you know, a sense of fairness can be difficult to achieve depending on the team's makeup and how long the team has been together. So I always tried in terms of making it fair to have the team participate in determining how to do the holiday coverage. Meaning if, you know, if somebody is got a special event, they share it with the team and say, well, look, you know, this particular New Year's is really important because we're getting the whole family together, which we haven't done in a long time. So then there's some compassion from the other team members. All right, you get to have New Year's off, but you take the next 2 weekends then, and you take one of mine so I don't have to do, you know, I get to skip one rotation or something. And most of the time, when you have a discussion with the team about, look, there is no fair way to cover holidays because sooner or later there'll be an outage on the holiday and somebody's time off is going to get messed up. So team, let's talk about how we're going to balance that out, because the last thing you want to do as a humane leader is just dictate it. Look, Roberto, I don't care that your mother's coming in from 1,000 miles away. You need to work this holiday. Tough. Well, that's not particularly humane. You know, there's probably some way that they can work around how to schedule that support, right? So being humane sometimes is helping your team actually come to the solution. You don't dictate it as the humane leader. You have parameters. Look, we need somebody on call the entire holiday weekend. So let's suppose, I don't know, Christmas lands on a Friday, let's say, for example. So maybe the company's got Thursday and Friday off, and then Saturday and Sunday is the weekend. So you got 4 days you need to cover. let's discuss it, team. And my requirement is somebody's got to be on call to cover that whole time. It needs to be scheduled so the service desk knows who's the most important person to call during each time slot if an event occurs. But let the team kind of resolve how they want to do it and how they are going to make it fair. And sometimes it's, somebody volunteers, look, I'll just take it for the whole weekend so everybody can have off, but I want the next 3 of my rotations where I normally would have on duty for the regular weekend, somebody else takes it. And it usually worked out when you have a compassionate discussion with the team. They realize how important support is. It usually gets resolved without, a leader having to become a boss. That's the last thing you want to have to do. Last resort.
Oh, yes, I do remember well. So sometimes in my past, when a boss approach us and say, okay, uh, we require for this to be delivered on Monday or in 2 weeks time, and this guy left for vacation, and he was bragging about his vacation, but we stuck. So what you mentioned about talking with the team and being in a candid conversation and say, okay, we have this situation and this team is going to do it. Okay, let's talk about it. As you might say, it is something that someone might say, okay, I have a big party. Let's stick to the example of the New Year. Let's say I don't celebrate the 31st because I don't know, my religion or something like that, but I celebrate all the time. So people might say, might raise their hands and say, I can do it, I cannot do it, and as a team, we could manage that. And I think that is one of the things about humane leadership, a humane leader, excuse me, that we talk candidly with people, with the persons, and say, this is a situation, this is a problem. How are we going to solve it? It's not never about how are you going to solve it, how are you going to do it. It's never about blaming other people or never about not taking a decision. It's someone as we, and that will be the best solution.
Yep. Yep. And it's important that they feel engaged in this, empowered in the decision making. If they really feel that no matter what, you're gonna trump their suggestions or whatever and overrule it and just dictate the answer in the end. I've gone into some newer teams where I'm replacing somebody else and this kind of situation is coming up where I'm fairly new to the team. They don't know my leadership style, and you'll propose this kind of problem and there's silence. That's when you're replacing an inhumane leader and they're not used to being empowered to participate in the decision-making process. So if you encounter one of these problems where you need to determine support coverage and you're fairly new to the team and you don't get any suggestions from the team, realize that it's not that they don't have ideas, it's probably that they're afraid to give them or that they had some fairly poor leadership in the past and they're reluctant to make any suggestions because maybe of what had happened in the past. So do kind of seed the conversation. As we've talked before in leadership sessions, these are kinds of things you want to develop your relationship with the team over time so that when you reach a challenge like this, they're more open to participating in it as a discussion, not a dictator boss employee relationship. It's really the team saying, look, our application, our infrastructure, whatever it is that the team does is very important to the business. We have a responsibility to do the right thing, but how do we do that fairly amongst the team members? Because the last thing you want to do is always have the same person stuck with weekend on-call duty. I had inherited some teams where it was always the most junior person who got stuck with the holiday duty. And I get that to some companies have a very seniority versus junior hierarchy, but that's a hard way then to attract talent in the future if they know the junior person's always going to get the worst assignments and the worst, duty. So I'm very reluctant to follow that kind of hierarchy. You need to respect your elders. I get that. That's all fine. But for some of this stuff like 7x24 support, it's best if you can negotiate with the team and work out some trades and let them determine what feels fair, because fair is so arbitrary, and a boss can never determine what's fair. A humane leader has a chance of determining what's fair, but really the team is the one that should decide what's fair for 7x24 support.
Yeah, and the thing is, you maybe as a humane leader, maybe when you were a junior, your boss treated you that way. You're the junior, you have to be stuck at this and everything. But when you grow up, and I mean with everything regarding emotional intelligence and all these soft skills, and you have become a humane leader, you don't have to act as you have acted in the past. Someone ordered you. It is something about what is, how would I feel if a human leader approaches me and we talk. So I think it's more of what I didn't do in the past, but more what I want to do with my team right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And realize too is that if, because of the hierarchy of the team and your role, there may be a reason why you as the humane leader cannot take the 7x24 support. I think sometimes humane leaders go overboard and saying, well, gosh, I feel so bad for my team to have to work on the holidays. I will take that rotation every time. Well, that's actually not being humane. I mean, it's self-sacrificing. It's awfully kind of you, but that's not teaching the team responsibility either, right? Because I don't feel that that's really appropriate. And eventually, as a leader, you're not going to have the technical skills at some point to solve everything, right? As you go up in the leadership chain, the skills become more about your emotional intelligence and skills, and less about your technical skills. So at some point, as you develop as a leader, you probably can't technically do the job of 7x24 support. So, let your team develop and have those arguments over, well, I had it last time. That's part of your job as humane leader too, is to have the team argue. Sometimes it won't be an easy conversation for who's on support, and you can't take the duty. You can't take the decision away from them and say, well, I'll just do it. Well, no, that's really not going to work in the long run either. So have them have the tough debate. You can be a referee, you can moderate and help make sure that everybody's contributing their ideas to the solution, from the senior most person to the most junior person, and get everybody involved in that decision making. And then ultimately, as the leader, you do decide what's fair, but better to have the team tell you what
Yes.
they think.
And one thing is people will surprise you because there are many people who likes to work at night, who are better. I'm a day guy. At night I have to rest. But there are people who are the opposite. So in that time they will say to you, hey, I can take from 0100 to 0600 this shift because I usually am being awake. So people will really surprise you about that.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think one thing that I would do occasionally is the incentive. And that is, depending on how strict your company is, you could, hey, if you take the weekend, I'll give you a 3-day weekend coming up off the books. You don't have to use up your vacation time. Now, many companies have gone to unlimited vacation, so that takes away some of the joy in having a special 3-day weekend. But if you're one of those companies that still has set amounts of vacation per person, maybe there's some flexibility where you as the boss can say, well, look, if you take the holiday, weekend, I'll give you 2-3-day weekends coming up during the summer because I know you like to go camping or whatever, those kinds of things, and give them some extra time off might mean a lot more to them in the summer. Sometimes that's a way to incent somebody to volunteer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, great. Okay. Before we do the wrap up, I have a question. What is the most difficult decision that you have made with this scenario before, and did it work well?
Ooh, if I remember correctly, I believe out of all the years where I had operations teams, which was probably about half of my career, I do recall that I did have to assign someone the pager once where I could just not get somebody to volunteer, no matter what I did, offering the extra time. And I'll tell you, it's not pleasant to have to be a boss. When in your heart you want to try to be a humane leader, but ultimately I explained it as, look, it's okay. I get the team can't come up with a process here. I think it was for 4th of July, so it was one of our big summer holidays. It was going to be a long weekend, and everybody had their excuse as to why they couldn't do it. So and it was in an area where I technically couldn't do the job myself. I could help escalate. In other words, if they couldn't fix it, I could work on escalating to bring in other teams to help and support, but I couldn't take the role myself. So I had to assign somebody to it, and they were not happy. They were going, out of town kind of thing, having to lug the laptop with them to go and do this. And sometimes you got to be a boss, and I try to avoid it as much as possible. I felt bad. I did offer them some extra time off, because we were still at that stage counting vacation days, and some of the junior team members, if they only have 2 weeks of vacation, getting an extra 2 or 3 days off was a big deal. But sometimes you got to be a boss, and it did not feel good.
Yeah, I was something like that back in 2009. Before we had all these cloud companies such as AWS and Azure, we had to modify. We had our own servers. So suddenly we discovered that we have a 4x number of customers consuming our services. So I had to tell someone who was really good, but he was really a complaining guy to complain about everything. You have to be here with me in this weekend, so we could switch. We could modify our servers so the load balancers will work perfectly. And he had a face the whole weekend that he didn't want to be there, but I was with him, so what can I tell you?
Yeah, understand. It's tough sometimes when you got to, unfortunately, be a boss. It doesn't feel good, but I think if you do it with as much compassion within reason, try and offer some incentive around it, and acknowledge, look, I don't want to do it this way, but I'm out of options, and try and be a compassionate boss instead of a humane leader for 1 or 2 days, and usually you'll still be okay.
Indeed, great.
Well, very good. Thanks for joining us on another episode of How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We hope our insights help you become a smarter and more strategic leader. Apply today's lessons to see a positive impact on your team and career. Catch all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, MSN Podcast, Anchor, and YouTube. Join us next week as we discuss something trendy in the leadership world. Until then, stay humane, stay successful. See you later, Roberto.
Bye-bye.